Number 10. Blackbeard Ship. The shipwreck of the Queen Anne's Revenge was discovered way back in the year 1996. In case you're not familiar with the name, it was the legendary ship that belonged to the even more legendary pirate, Captain Blackbeard. The crashed vessel was found submerged off the coast of North Carolina, where Blackbeard may have abandoned the ship on purpose. Most historians agree that in 1718, Blackbeard definitely crashed his notorious ship into the sandbar, where it later rusted and crumpled and sank down to the floor of the ocean. But new information says it wasn't so much of a crash as an intentional sinking. Blackbeard wanted to abandon his ship, but to do so in such a way that it looked like an accident. After inspecting the ruins of the broken ship, the experts are pretty sure it was already in rough condition before it sank. Because the Queen Anne's Revenge was such an important part of Blackbeard's image as a fearsome pirate, it was crucial that he was never defeated in the ship. It's likely that Blackbeard destroyed his favorite ship on purpose, abandoning it to the bottom of the sea, just so that his enemies wouldn't see how weak the ship had actually become. Arg! The pirate strategy. Number 9. Baby bones. In a small Italian village that's been around since ancient times, archaeologists have uncovered abandoned baby bones. This terrifying discovery came over years of excavations at the settlement, about 15 miles, 24 kilometers from the major city of Siena in Tuscany. The settlement goes back to around the 8th century BC, to a time when residents apparently threw away the babies that they didn't want to keep. The researchers were digging beneath the floor of a workshop that was used for manufacturing goods like roof tiles. They found pig bones, goat bones, and sheep bones. But the most disturbing part was when they started finding baby bones. According to Anthony Tuck with the University of Massachusetts, the babies were likely abandoned soon after birth and then left in the same trash heaps as discarded animal carcasses. Speaking with Live Science, Tuck said, "This kind of new data makes people a bit uncomfortable. People have a tendency to romanticize the past, especially in a place like Tuscany. When we have direct evidence for this kind of behavior, it can be a little tricky to present." In other words, the Romans didn't care all that much about their infants. When babies died or if the parents couldn't take care of them, they simply left their bodies in the trash, where archaeologists stumbled upon their abandoned bones thousands of years later. Number 8. Forgotten sailboat. In 2010, Abby Sutherland tried to become the youngest person ever to circumnavigate the world by themselves. Unfortunately, the California teen was forced to abandon her journey after she got caught in some brutal storms between Africa and Australia. The mast of her custom boat snapped, leaving her adrift for days in the middle of the Indian Ocean before she was eventually rescued. Because her boat was so damaged, she had no choice but to abandon the thing in the sea and quit her journey around the world. 9 years later, her abandoned boat resurfaced. It was discovered just recently floating off the coast of Australia, covered in barnacles yet still somehow in one piece. According to the South Australia Police, Abby's boat was found capsized by a plane scouting for tuna on New Year's Eve. A pair of fishing boats and a police helicopter went out to investigate the wreckage, confirming it was Abby's boat thanks to the unique paintings on its side. The discovery was a bit of a shock to Abby, who has changed her life dramatically since trying to sail across the world. She now has 4 children and is living in Alabama. She told ABC News that when she heard about the discovery of her boat, her heart skipped a beat. She also said it looked a little creepy after being lost in the ocean for so long. Number 7. Sunken military equipment. After World War II, hundreds and hundreds of pieces of military equipment were abandoned underwater by the U.S. military. This happened at the island of Vanuatu in the Pacific Ocean. Rather than bring back all the vehicles they used during the war, the U.S. thought it would be a bit easier just to dump them all in the water. Out of sight, out of mind. Saving the environment wasn't exactly high on the list back then. There are bulldozers, forklifts, tractors, and all kinds of different machines that were used at military bases in the Vanuatu Islands. The place where all the pieces of machinery are dumped is called Million Dollar Point. Why is it called that? Well, because the machinery was worth millions. There's not much new to be found here. Million Dollar Point has been a popular tourist attraction for years, with divers able to swim down and explore the wreckage of construction equipment thrown away by the U.S. military. Would you like to dive down here and check out all this abandoned underwater equipment? Let us know in the comment section down below. And if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Stacks of cash. An urban explorer checking out an abandoned house just about got away with a whole heap of cash. It happened in January 2014 when Dave got off work early and went to check out a decrepit old house that he'd heard about from a friend. When he arrived at the abandoned property, he was thrilled to find it in complete shambles. The place was literally destroyed, falling apart, filled with all kinds of spooky items like old wheelchairs, rusted tools that could have come from a torture chamber, and weird old black and white portraits. Oh yeah, and a whole lot of money. When Dave was looking through the house, he found a yellow hardware bag filled with $7,000 in cash from both the US and Canada. The cash was from the 1960s, but rather than keep the money for himself, Dave actually managed to track down a number of the people who used to own the property. He got in touch with the previous inhabitants of the house's granddaughter and then sent the $7,000 to her. As to where the money came from, the granddaughter revealed that her grandparents had probably been stashing cash they made at their fruit stand away for a rainy day and then forgot all about it when the house was abandoned. Number 5. A pot of gold. A demolition team in France was called in to rip apart an abandoned house. Tearing down an abandoned structure is nothing new, but what the team found inside the place left everyone in total shock. As they got to work tearing down the building, they discovered a lead container filled to the brim with gold coins. Whoever abandoned this house also abandoned a literal pot of gold. The workers found 600 Belgian coins, all of them dated to 1870. They were even stamped with the likeness of King Leopold II, who reigned from 1865 to 1909. According to what experts said in the local French newspapers, the pot of gold could be worth upwards of $120,000. Unfortunately for the builders, they probably won't see a lot of that money. French law says that abandoned treasure is split 50-50 between the finders and landowners. Then, after the crew splits it with each other, their bosses, and their company, they'll probably be left with nothing except a single gold coin each. Do you agree with that law? Number 4. Soviet missile launcher. The crude shell of a Cold War missile launcher was recently discovered in a Russian forest by a random guy having a weekend adventure. The guy's name is Oleg Tsurkin, and he got a bit more than he bargained for while taking an ATV ride through a remote part of a Russian woodland. He was cruising through an area of the forest normally too swampy to pass through. However, because of the unusually dry winter they were having, the muddy swamp was stable enough for him to get through on his ATV. He ended up in an unexplored area that he'd never seen before and was shocked to discover signs of human activity. The first thing he came across was a barbed wire fence covered in rust. Curious, he pushed his way through the barbed wire and continued until he came upon an abandoned missile launcher. He decided to investigate. The vehicle had been out of commission for a seriously long time, with all its important parts missing. The engine was gone, there were obviously no missiles, and the vehicle had been pretty much torn apart piece by piece. It definitely needed more than a boost to get it going. And while we don't know why this missile launcher got abandoned in the middle of a forest, it probably had something to do with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, when thousands of pieces of military equipment ended up getting abandoned overnight all across what was once the mighty USSR. Number 3. The Ekaterinburg. In 2011, a powerful Ekaterinburg Russian submarine almost caused one of the worst nuclear disasters in history. The Ekaterinburg, which just so happened to be stocked with nuclear ballistic missiles, had made a quick stop before going back out on patrol. The underwater vessel was going to have a little bit of welding work done to its bow. That was when something went wrong. The welding equipment lit the wooden scaffolding around the submarine on fire, the fire spread to the interior rubber anechoic coating, and the flames raged for almost a full 24 hours before crews managed to put the fire out. The scary part is that if the fire had managed to reach the nuclear ballistic missiles, the resulting explosion would have probably flattened the nearby town and its population of 300,000 people. It would have also blown radioactive dust over a huge area, resulting in tons of radioactive harm. Even though the missiles never went off, the submarine's life was pretty much over after the incident. She did have some repairs done after the fire and returned to service 3 years later, but was ultimately abandoned. The submarine was then officially decommissioned in 2021. Number 2. Moldovan nuclear bunker. In the 1970s, nuclear bunkers were all the rage, not only in America, but also in Europe. Leaders of Soviet states began frantically building nuclear fallout shelters where they could seek refuge in the case of a devastating blast. Most of these nuclear shelters have already been reduced to rubble, lost altogether, or are still hiding in secret military zones. One such bunker is still open for the public to see, located in the small European country of Moldova. The bunker is called Object 1180, and it's really nothing more than a giant metal cylinder about 180 feet, 54 meters tall, and 100 feet, 30 meters in diameter. The huge metal tube was embedded in a shaft blasted into the ground and fixed to hydraulic cylinders. The hydraulics would move the tube deeper underground in case of a nuclear strike. But Object 1180 was never completed. When the Red Army abandoned the project in 1991, the unfinished base was forgotten. Locals quickly descended on the project and ripped apart everything that was valuable. Today, it's still sitting there in the middle of the forest like a big rusty bucket half stuck down a well. Would you be interested in checking this out? Let us know in the comments section down below. Number 1. Creepy Doll Factory. There's a place in Spain that is creepier than any place you can dream up in your wildest nightmares. It's a terrifying abandoned doll facility with hundreds and hundreds of half-made human dolls scattered across the factory floor like dismembered bodies. The factory is cold and dark on the inside with molds and casts in the shapes of human body parts stacked against the walls. There are also arms, legs, torsos, and heads thrown about as if the place had been hit by a tornado. And yes, some of the heads are still even on the factory line, held tight by pieces of machinery that will never run again. It looks like a robotics lab where someone was trying to create their own army of Terminators. It's not exactly clear when or why the factory was abandoned, but it definitely happened overnight. It looks as if manufacturing stopped abruptly. Everyone was told to leave, and that was the end of that. Number 11. The Giant of Kandahar. In 2016, rumors began to circulate about American Special Forces soldiers killing a 12-foot-tall, 3.7 meters red-headed, knife-wielding giant who tipped the scales at 1,100 pounds. Known as the Kandahar Giant, the creature supposedly existed from biblical times until recently. The story claims that a gargantuan humanoid killed a soldier in Afghanistan in 2002, causing the rest of the unit to seek revenge. The U.S. Department of Defense claims to have no record of the incident. A blogger and YouTuber named L.A. Marzulli appears to be responsible for perpetuating the story of the Kandahar Giant. He posted a video interview with an alleged eyewitness who supposedly saw the killing happen with his own eyes. The person claimed that the military unit was looking for a mission soldier in a remote desert location when the giant emerged from a cave holding a knife and plunged the blade into a soldier named Dan. Its dead body was put inside an aircraft and carted away. The details surrounding the story are incredibly vague and unsubstantiated. Simply put, there's no overwhelming evidence to indicate that Marzulli's claims are true. Number 10. Prada Marfa. The vast, barren expanse of land outside Marfa, Texas is the last place you might expect to find a luxury clothing store. But if you drive through the area along US Highway 90, you'll pass a small building that looks like a shop filled with genuine Prada merchandise. It's not a real store, but an art installation created by a pair of Berlin-based artists. The replica was built with biodegradable materials and will slowly decay over time. According to Vogue magazine, this aspect of its design is a testament to Western materialism and societal trends. Sadly, just days after it went on display in 2005, the building was robbed and vandalized. The stolen items included 6 handbags and 14 right-footed shoes. Thankfully, the merchandise was replaced and a better security system was installed. In 2013, after going unnoticed for 8 years, the display was spotted by the Texas Department of Transportation. They considered it to be an advertisement, which requires a permit. Officials announced the following year that Prada Marfa would be redesignated as a museum, exempting it from advertising laws. The site was damaged again in 2014 when vandals painted the building light blue and hung signs advertising the LA-based footwear company Tom's Shoes. Number 9. Strange Figures. Earlier this year, a Google Earth user named Jason Klein spotted a group of strange figures wearing white cloaks in the abandoned mining town of Rhyolite, Nevada. He posted a video of the alarming discovery on TikTok, and it quickly garnered over 17 million views. Klein was shocked and confused by what he found, but commenters quickly solved the mystery by explaining that the statues are an artwork installment. Known as The Last Supper, the group of eerie figures was sculpted by Belgian artist Albert Sukalski. They're part of an exhibition called the Goldwell Open Air Museum and are situated near the road leading to California's Death Valley. Rhyolite was founded at the beginning of the 20th century and was abandoned in 1920. Today, it's a popular tourist attraction, and the creepy sculptures add a nice touch to an already spooky place. Number 8. Cadillac Ranch. In Amarillo, Texas, there's a collection of 10 graffiti-colored Cadillacs buried face down in the sand. It's a pretty confusing and strange sight to anyone passing by. The cars are a public art installation called Cadillac Ranch. A trio of artists called the Ant Farm created the exhibit in 1974. After coming up with the idea, they sought funding from wealthy sponsors. An eccentric local millionaire named Stanley Marsh III ended up agreeing to finance the project. The Cadillacs were originally placed in a wheat field, but were relocated in 1997 to accommodate the growing nearby city. Although they're located on private property, visitors are implicitly encouraged to enter the site and to add their own personal touch to the display by spray painting graffiti on the cars. The vehicles are occasionally restored or painted different colors to mark special occasions, to provide a blank slate for future visitors to make their mark on, and for public campaigns. What would you add? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 7. Observation Post Rock. Observation Post Rock is a mud fort that was once controlled by the Taliban. Located in Afghanistan's Helmand province, the 30-foot-high, 9.1-meter mound offers an advantageous view over the landscape below. It eventually became a post for U.S. Marines and British soldiers. Lance Corporal Brendan Kelly noticed the hill's ancient design, which consists of small tunnels leading to a single chamber, when the Marines blew up the mound and the tunnels collapsed, according to the New York Times. He believes that the structure may have originally been a fort or a tomb. Bones have been found at the site in the years following the blast. They were initially thought to be the remains of Taliban insurgents who died in the tunnel collapse, but it turns out that the bones are decades or even centuries older than that. A local researcher who spoke with journalists Thomas Gibbons Neff and Timur Shah said that the mound is, in fact, an ancient burial ground. Experts believe that it was built sometime before 1740, and nobody knows who built it. The rock was used as a cemetery until around 1980, when 40 communist Afghan police officers were brutally executed there. Sometime after 2008, the site gained a reputation for being haunted. Soldiers who were stationed there reported seeing mysterious lights, hearing bizarre static on their radios, strange lights and sounds, sudden changes in temperature, and getting an uneasy feeling. Former Lance Corporal Jose Herrera told the New York Times that there was an overwhelming odor of death, especially at night. At first, the soldiers' superiors were quick to blame combat-induced anxiety for the alleged paranormal encounters. But so many soldiers have claimed to have had these experiences that their stories became believable. Number 6. Ancient Cemetery. In the year 2000, a group of scientists were at a site called Gobero in Niger, searching for dinosaur fossils. Instead, they found a large cemetery filled with ancient human remains. Dating back an estimated 10,000 years, it's the largest known cemetery in the Sahara Desert. Around 200 people were buried there, along with fish, crocodiles, and other creatures. Evidence suggests that the site was inhabited during two distinct time periods with a roughly 1,000-year gap in between. The groups that occupied the site were known as the Kiphians and the Tenarians. Artifacts from their daily lives, including harpoons, arrowheads, and bone jewelry, were found alongside them in their graves. The site contained numerous bizarre burials, including a man whose head was placed in a pot and another whose head was laid to rest on top of a turtle shell. There was also a woman and two children who were buried facing each other on a bed of flowers. The tools and animals at Gobero seemed out of place for the modern Saharan climate. This is because they existed at a time known as the Green Sahara, also known as the African Humid Period. Changes in the Earth's orbit brought more rain to the region, resulting in more plant life and water, as well as animals who depend on those resources. Number 5. Giant Hand. In the dry and barren Atacama Desert of northern Chile, there's a massive 36-foot-tall cement hand protruding from the desert floor. Situated about an hour's drive south of the city of Antofagasta on a gravel road alongside the Pan American Highway, the lone sculpture is called La Mano del Desierto, or the Hand of the Desert. Created in 1992 by sculptor Mario Irarrázaval, the enormous hand represents the emptiness of the vast Atacama Desert. Motorists are often surprised when they see it, after driving for hours upon hours and seeing nothing but hills in every direction. Vandals target the Hand of the Desert due to its remote location, despite signs telling visitors not to touch it. The community members from Antofagasta who commissioned the monument get together and clean graffiti off it twice a year. The sculpture was created as a corresponding left hand to another one of the artist's works. About a decade before he made the Hand of the Desert, the artist created a right hand that was placed 1,200 miles east of Antofagasta on a beach in Uruguay. Number 4. A Ghost Town. The ghost town of Bodie, California can be found in the Sierra Nevada desert. It became a boom town in 1876 after gold was discovered in the area. After that, the population exploded, and Bodie was home to around 10,000 residents at its peak. But like many boom towns, its glory was short-lived. Lawlessness plagued Bodie, and crime became unmanageable. The town had a well-deserved reputation for being a haven for vices like greed and lust, and was filled with bars, brothels, and gambling halls. Bodie's decline began sometime before 1915 when people began to move out in hopes of finding a better life elsewhere. Then in 1932, a catastrophic fire burned 95% of the town's buildings. A series of other tragedies, coupled with the devastating effects of the Great Depression, led to Bodie's downfall. By the end of World War II, there were only 6 residents left there. 2 of them were murdered, and 3 died from mysterious diseases. The widespread tragedy that the town experienced throughout its existence gave rise to rumors about paranormal activity being responsible for the misfortune. What's left of Bodie became a designated National Historic Landmark in 1962. California's Parks and Recreation Department maintains the site in a state of arrested decay, which means that they're not trying to improve or renovate Bodie, but are working to prevent the condition of its buildings from worsening. Number 3. A lake that appeared out of nowhere. In 2014, Tunisian shepherds discovered a lake that had appeared in the desert out of nowhere. Nicknamed Lac du Gafsa, or Mystery Lake, it became an overnight attraction for both locals and tourists. Curious people flocked there to catch some much-needed relief from the drought-ridden heat. Some people thought that the body of water was a curse, while others saw it as a miracle. The lake's origins are a complete mystery, and officials became worried that the water might be radioactive or contain diseases or cancer-causing chemicals. They cautioned people against swimming there, but they did not officially ban them from it. Just days after the lake appeared, the turquoise water became infested with algae and turned into a green sludge, spurring even more concerns that it might be dangerous. The sudden change indicated that the water supply was stagnant and not being replenished. Experts believe that seismic activity may have ruptured rock above the water table, causing water to spew out of the ground and form the lake. But there don't seem to be any recent updates on any findings, so it's safe to assume that they still don't know for sure. Number 2. Scotty's Castle. In the far northern part of California's Death Valley, there's a Spanish colonial revival-style villa called the Death Valley Ranch. Built during the 1920s, it's nicknamed Scotty's Castle after Walter E. Scott, a gold prospector and con man who falsely claimed that he built the mansion even though he never owned the property. Years earlier, Scott had befriended the mansion's owner, a Chicago millionaire named Albert Mussey Johnson. He convinced Johnson to invest in a fraudulent mining business. The two remained unlikely friends even after Johnson found out about the scam. Unfortunately, Johnson accidentally built the house on government land. The Great Depression hit while he was trying to sort out the issue with authorities, and he lost a lot of money. Instead of treating the villa as a winter home like he and his wife intended, Johnson rented out rooms at Scott's suggestion as a way to bring in some much-needed income. The mansion was never finished being built. The Johnsons left the house to the Gospel Foundation, their nonprofit dedicated to social issues. In 1970, the National Park Service bought Scotts Castle and opened it for tours to the public. The building was severely damaged in a flood in 2015 and is currently closed for repairs. Number 1. The Domes at Casa Grande. The Domes are a collection of derelict buildings located in Casa Grande, Arizona. They're the only structures that are visible against the backdrop of the vast desert. 3 of them are spherical structures connected by tunnels, and 1 is a flying saucer shape. They were built during the 1970s and 80s as computer manufacturing facilities. But the company ran out of money, the bank took control of its assets, and the site was never finished being built. The local groundwater was contaminated, further preventing construction from being completed. Locals suspect that they're used for witchcraft and satanic worship and warn outsiders from exploring them, and especially to stay out of the tunnels, according to Atlas Obscura. There's even talk about animal sacrifices and other gruesome rituals happening within the domes. There are also rumors about aliens, ghosts, and paranormal activity. People have reported hearing voices and seeing apparitions as well as tapping sounds against their vehicle as they approach the site. Like any abandoned site, the buildings are undoubtedly popular among underage drinkers and deviants trying to party. But nobody seems to truly know whether anything more sinister goes on there. Either way, it's a good idea to avoid the tunnels because they're structurally unsound. In early 2018, one of the domes collapsed, prompting the city to order their demolition. A gate was put up around the site to keep people out, but the structures have not been destroyed yet. They're located on private property and require curious visitors to obtain permission and pay an entry fee. Anyone who trespasses could be arrested. Number 11. An ancient alien civilization? So far, scientists have only found evidence of microscopic life forms possibly existing on Mars. They're almost completely confident that the atmosphere never had enough oxygen to host anything bigger or more complex. But this doesn't stop people from fantasizing about a past civilization there. In 2017, California Congressman Dana Rohrabacher asked planetary scientists to investigate the possibility of an ancient alien society living on the red planet thousands of years ago. He referenced recent discoveries of Mars once being home to large bodies of water as evidence that this was possible. During an inquiry on the matter, panelist and NASA scientist Ken Farley tried to explain that any water on Mars dried up billions of years ago, and that there's no evidence of aliens ever having lived there. Rohrabacher asked Farley why he would rule the possibility out, and he responded that he considered it highly unlikely. Our fascination with Mars dates back to the early 19th century, when telescopes improved and gave us a much better look at the planet. And it's only going to continue growing as space technology advances, with rovers like Curiosity and Perseverance capturing the most detailed images yet, and scientists working to eventually send astronauts there. Number 10. Dust Devil Tracks. In 2018, NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter snapped photos of dark, claw-like tracks across a collection of brightly colored Martian dunes. While they look somewhat like the footprints of a monster, they're actually created by swirling columns of strong winds called dust devils. This phenomenon also happens on Earth, but the dust devils on Mars are much taller, often reaching as much as 5 miles, 8 kilometers into the sky. And they can get even bigger than that. In 2012, NASA recorded a colossal dust devil measuring 12 miles, 20 kilometers high. In their wake, they leave huge patterns of dark streaks, with each track measuring up to 98 feet, 30 meters wide, and 2.5 miles, 4 kilometers long. By studying dust devils, scientists hope to learn more about the wind patterns on Mars and how they affect the formation of dunes. Number 9. A face. News headlines around the world went crazy in 1976 over an image of what looked like a human face protruding from the Martian surface. From the beginning of all the hype, scientists claimed that the formation was merely a pile of rocks that looked like a face, much like how we interpret the shapes of clouds as resembling different objects. According to the experts, the lights and shadows in the photo played out in just the right way. Nothing more, nothing less. But that explanation isn't very exciting. So, of course, conspiracy theorists let their imaginations run wild and adamantly deny that the site was formed naturally. Many claim that the face is evidence of life on Mars, and some believers even argued that it represents the remnants of buildings left behind by an ancient alien civilization. Both NASA and the European Space Agency took more detailed photos of the face and concluded, not surprisingly, that their original analysis was correct, that the face is nothing more than an optical illusion. Skeptics claim that they were pressured into saying that and covering up the truth. But what do you think? Number 8. Garbage. Earlier this year, NASA's Perseverance rover purposely dropped a piece of its equipment on the rocky surface of the red planet. No, it wasn't littering. The robot landed on Mars with a protective shield called a belly pan covering its sampling system. It had to shed this panel in order to carry out its work, taking samples of rock and soil that will be retrieved during a later mission. After dropping the pan, the machine used its robotic arm to snap photos of its undercarriage. NASA also published footage of a practice run of the ejection process before sending Perseverance to Mars. The rover's sampling system contains 43 tubes for storing materials, which will be left on the planet's surface until another machine comes and collects them at some point in the future. In addition to ditching its belly pan, Perseverance left a few other things on the Martian surface. When it first arrived on the red planet in February, the machine's descent was anything but graceful. It crash-landed, causing a huge plume of smoke to rise from the ground. Thankfully, scientists planned for this to happen, and they built the rover to withstand the impact by equipping it with landing gear that was designed to be discarded during the landing process. Number 7. A gorilla. British tabloids thought it would be a fun idea to get their readers worked up in early 2016 by featuring what they claimed was a photo of a gorilla on Mars. Captured by NASA's Curiosity rover in 2004, the image drew little attention when the agency first released it. But then it appeared on a YouTube video made by someone known only as Mr. Enigma. The claims in the video inspired far-flung headlines across mainstream media, adding the so-called gorilla to a growing list of animals that people believe they've identified in pictures of the Martian landscape. Extraterrestrial enthusiasts reportedly spent hours scouring the internet for an earthly species they could correlate with the alleged primate. Some people even believed that the photo also featured a camel, while others somehow saw a mother bear and her cub. It's arguably outlandish to think that animals we're familiar with on Earth could also somehow exist in space. But the gorilla sighting is just one example of how this belief has spread like wildfire over the years. In fact, in some of his other YouTube videos, Mr. Enigma has claimed to spot an octopus, an Egyptian statue, and other out-of-place items and creatures on the red planet. It's easy to assume that this content was created by someone with an oversized imagination and too much time on their hands. But he's not the only person to do this. Plenty of other conspiracy theorists have reported seeing crabs, lizards, bears, rabbits, and other animals in photos of Mars. As always, the scientific community stands by its claims that these are nothing more than rocks and other natural features of the landscape. Number 6. An out-of-place boulder. In late 2020, NASA's Curiosity rover encountered a noticeably out-of-place boulder on Mars. The gigantic rock is shiny and black and looks nothing like the surrounding landscape. It was spotted on a peak called Mount Sharp. The Curiosity team took note of the conspicuous mass and planned to further investigate in hopes of figuring out exactly what it is. Based on its distinct color, they believe it could be a meteorite. In the past, the rover has detected similar rocks that turned out to be iron meteorites. The boulder could also come from a different part of Mount Sharp. Scientists from the Mars Science Laboratory named the rock Island Devar after a Scottish island. This is just one of many fascinating discoveries that the Curiosity rover has made since it landed on Mars in 2012. In February, it was joined by the Perseverance rover, which is scouring the planet's surface for signs of ancient life and collecting rock and soil samples that researchers hope to eventually bring back to Earth. Number 5. A thigh bone? Many people who believe that there was once life on Mars will cling to whatever evidence they can find. Such is the case with an alleged thigh bone that NASA's Curiosity rover took snapshots of in 2014. Conspiracy theorists and alien fanatics noticed the femur-like formation and ran wild with their belief that it proves there was past life on the red planet. Media outlets only added to the hype by picking up the story and distributing it to the masses. NASA tried to squash the rumor by releasing a statement clarifying that the object is nothing more than a rock that was shaped by natural processes like wind or water erosion. It seems as though most people accepted this explanation and the buzz died down. But the story resurfaced last year, giving rise to a fresh round of claims that evidence of past life on Mars has been found. Thankfully, this time around, several news outlets were quick to set the record straight instead of appealing to shock value. Several articles reminded readers of NASA's 2014 statement about the object being a rock. In doing so, they mentioned how Mars may have once been able to host living organisms, but that these creatures would have been microscopic. There simply wasn't enough oxygen in the atmosphere for anything bigger to survive. But even the most rational explanation will fail to sway someone who truly wants to believe that there's more to the story. One way or another, they will always find a way to make sense of their views, even when doing so defies logic. Do you think there might have been ancient alien life forms on Mars? Let me know in the comments below, but first, be sure to subscribe. Number 4. Happy Face Crater. If you look at the Gall crater from a bird's eye view, you'll notice that it resembles a smiley face. Nicknamed the Happy Face Crater, the face was first spotted in the 1970s during NASA's Viking Orbiter 1 mission. The crater is located near the Martian South Pole, which sees unforgiving winter temperatures that drop as low as -243 degrees Fahrenheit, -153 degrees Celsius. But the landscape isn't literally frozen in place, and the Gall crater's appearance is known to change from time to time. The amount of frost covering the ground varies depending on the time of the year. Moreover, the Happy Face's mouth has gotten noticeably bigger over the years, and its nose has transformed from 2 circles into one big haphazard blob. These changes are caused by thermal erosion and a process called sublimation. In a statement released last year, scientist Ross Bayer explained that the sun transforms carbon dioxide on the Martian surface directly from a solid to a gas. Last year, NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter discovered another Happy Face crater. This one didn't cause as much of an uproar, but skeptics claim that these are signs of ancient civilizations, much like our own Stonehenge. Number 3. A human. People have long been obsessed with the idea that there could be life on Mars. So it came as no surprise when NASA released new images of the red planet in 2008 and many people saw what they thought looked like a woman on the surface. Some even speculated that she was alive when the photos were taken. Scientists offered the far more rational, albeit boring explanation that the human-like figure is nothing more than a rock. They argued that this is just another example of people seeing shapes and objects in inanimate objects, like clouds, foods, and other things. Science blogger Benjamin Radford argued that people's interpretation of the object as a human indicates that there is indeed a psychological phenomenon at play, rather than scientific evidence of Martian life. He also explained that people failed to see other rock formations as possible life forms, although they could have easily perceived some of them as non-human creatures like a snake or an armadillo. Astronomer Phil Platt further discredited claims of a human being in the pictures by pointing out that the rock is just a few inches tall, meaning it's impossible for it to be a person. It seems as though it's just a classic example of the human mind's tendency to play tricks on itself and for people to see what they want to see, rather than what's really there. Number 2. Shining clouds. There aren't many cloudy days on Mars. Clouds typically appear near the equator during the coldest time of the year, when the planet is the furthest away from the sun in its orbit. But something unusual happened one Martian year ago, roughly 2 years in earthly time, when clouds began to form earlier than expected. NASA's Curiosity rover captured images of the glimmering clouds, which are filled with ice crystals that makes them shine and sometimes even gives them different colors. Scientists are trying to understand why the clouds formed early, and what's different about them versus typical Martian clouds. They noticed that these early clouds formed at a higher altitude than normal. A Martian cloud normally sits 37 miles, 60 kilometers in the sky and is made from water ice, according to NASA. But these clouds sat in a much colder atmosphere and were therefore likely made of frozen carbon dioxide, also known as dry ice. Regardless of what they're made of, they're stunning to look at. Known as mother-of-pearl clouds, they have an iridescent sheen and display an array of pastel hues, making the clouds here on Earth boring in comparison. Number 1. A fossilized fish? If NASA received $1 for every time someone thought they saw an animal or human on Mars, their budget would probably be astronomical because it happens a lot. In 2015, the agency posted an image taken by the Curiosity rover of rocks scattered on the planet's floor. Soon enough, self-proclaimed UFO expert Scott Waring published a blog claiming that he spotted the fossilized remains of a fish-like ancient alien in the photo. In his opinion, the alleged creature resembled an amphibious fish called the mudskipper, which exists here on Earth. He added that the discovery points towards a body of water once existing on Mars. It's admittedly true that the Red Planet was home today to a body of water bigger than the Arctic Ocean. Scientists announced this the same year Waring discovered the fish. But the object is most certainly not an animal fossil. NASA did not immediately respond to Waring's outlandish claims, but that's probably because it wasn't the first time he told the world that he found something unusual on Mars. In fact, much of his blog is dedicated to identifying creatures, UFOs, and other signs of life there. After debunking many of these objects as rocks and other natural features, perhaps scientists hope that the rest of the population would get the idea. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. See you next time for more amazing videos right here on American Eye.